You're listening to Skate of Thrones, your go-to podcast for dialed-in LA Kings coverage.
Where do I even start with the LA Kings and how they played tonight, losing 2-1 to the Chicago Blackhawks and what might have been the Kings' worst all-around performance of the year to this date, with the Blackhawks just scoring twice in the second period, the Kings showing no push in the first 40 minutes, and finally showing some fight at the end of games as they've done all year, but not being able to capitalize. They don't even get the overtime point because they lose 2-1 in regulation. Just so many question marks about LA right now, with the lines, with just where the team is at mentally, the fitness of the team a lot of times, even though they got healthier, bringing back Warren Fogle and Drew Doughty, but just a lot of confusion right now. And Jim Hiller didn't seem in the press conference to have a big explanation other than the Kings are not sticking to their game for what's going on right now. So a 2-1 final in favor of the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Kings will play them again on Saturday. But thank you so much for tuning in to Skate of Thrones. I'm Casey Kasliner, and yeah, I mean, I kind of summed it up. The Kings did not really show any effort in those first 40 minutes. Jim Hiller called the first period terrible, and he even switched up the lines to begin the third period, which seemed to work a little bit. He put LaFerriere back on the top line with Kopitar and Kempe, and I like that. I think, Kopitar and Kempe, the pairing of them, with a third player, whether that be Kuzmenko or someone else, has been shaky this year, but LaFerriere has really, put in his work, and for him to be on the third line, I just don't really get that. So, I think for him to be able to get some more ice time, be able to get some more effort in there is huge. And so that was one thing I noticed. But overall, just a really confusing game. And we'll talk a little bit more about what was actually confusing. But the lines to start this game, Trevor Moore on the top line with Kopitar and Kempe. Again, I don't know. I mean, I think that alone is not a horrible decision. But, you have a second line with Armia on it, and, he's a good player, but I don't know if he's a top six guy. And the reason why I bring all this up is because the Kings have just, they've gotten a little bit more healthy, but they've also changed up the lines. Deneau, demotion for him, fourth line center with Turcotte and Perry. I mean, Jim Hiller said that Deneau had a good game tonight, but I think it was really more that he didn't make a lot of mistakes. And, Deneau still didn't make, any flashy plays or anything, but he didn't give up any egregious plays, even though the Kings did give up a ton of turnovers and high danger looks for the Blackhawks. But like I mentioned, LaFerriere started the game on the third line, and we saw the only goal from the Kings be generated because of Warren Fogle, who originally started the game on the third line, but connected well with Trevor Moore after the lines were shifted a bit, and that seemed to work well. Deneau was not really involved on that play, but a good opportunity for the Kings to beat the icing, check pretty well, and get a goal. But they gave up two soft, kind of just easy setups for the Blackhawks. Really good setup on the first one, middle of the second period. Bertuzzi to Bedard, who scored. And Bedard, had a good game, but he gave up two power plays to the Kings. And, the power plays have just been egregious for LA. They're 0 for 5 on the extra man tonight. They shoot the puck, 27 times total, and some shots coming on the power play, but they need to shoot more. The final couple of power plays, you could see the structure coming about for LA, but they're just not getting the correct looks. And they have Drew Doughty on power play 1. They have Brandt Clark on power play 2. Drew Doughty made a handful of mistakes tonight. He gave the puck up. It's his first game back from a little while, so I get it, but also there needs to be a sense of urgency. And the thing with Brandt Clark is, he's a very talented, high-skill player, but he's not a guy who necessarily has a refined shot right now. And so, yeah, I think, there's a significant drop-off in offense after Brandt Clark is, him and then everyone else. I think there's a big drop-off. And CeCe and Dumoulin were back together. You're just not going to generate offense out of that. And Jim Hiller said something in the press conference that kind of stuck with me. He said, the LA Kings for years have been a team that has employed a certain strategy. They're a very hardworking team, high, defensive emphasis. And tonight they were trying to play the more flashy game, and it didn't work. And, I think there is some truth to that for sure. But I also think, you have to sort of change your philosophy, maybe not the entire structure of it, but you have to change some of your philosophy when you're just not scoring goals. I mean, the Kings only put up one tonight. They only put up one against Washington. They had, two against Vancouver, but one of those came in overtime. So, there's just a lot of things right now that aren't clicking on offense, and the power play is one of them. It's not working, and Jim Hiller talked about that a little bit, but I don't think he's going to change the lines too much, even though this was such a bad performance. Just such a boring game, especially through the first two periods. But yeah, I like how the Kings played in the third, but Warren Fogle and Darcy Kemper talked about it. They can't only have a sense of urgency when they're losing, and that's sort of been a theme this year, and it's worked to their advantage. Forcing overtime and sometimes even winning in overtime, but it's just mediocre. And Jim Hiller needs to do a better job. The Kings got booed off the ice after the second period. It was a 2-0 game with Chicago scoring twice in that period. Just so many giveaways. And Doughty was a part of that as well. Fiala, there's a lot of guys that were really just not careful with the puck. I liked certain shifts from Quentin Byfield. I thought he was confident, but it just wasn't enough. He needs to pepper the shots more. And Spencer Knight did a really good job in this game for the Chicago Blackhawks, but, just not what the Kings need right now. And they're lucky they have Darcy, but, Spencer Knight was also very good. Wyatt Kaiser had the second and final goal for the Blackhawks, came just 6 seconds left in the second period. It was another just good setup for Chicago getting into the slot. You got to give him credit. Trevor Moore, good goal for him. It was a play that the Kings capitalized on well and able to get the puck in deep. But, at the end of the game, they have a 6-on-4 chance, which, is a blessing and a curse, right? Because the Blackhawks can't ice the puck because they had Bedard in the penalty box. But at the same time, the Kings do have a 2-man advantage. Still couldn't score. Had so many opportunities. Spencer Knight, in the middle of the game, came out of his crease, and the Kings had basically an empty net to try to score on. They couldn't do it. You just can't make it up. It's just a lot of confusing play going on by the Kings, even though it's somewhat to be expected with the type of personnel they have. And you can tell the confidence is down. I mean, Warren Fogle and Darcy Kemper in the post-game press conference both talked about it, but it wears on the guys when they're not scoring, when the puck's just not going in the net. They have to take what they can get, but they're just, at the same time, to the flip side, they're not getting a lot. They're not getting what they need from opposing teams. The Blackhawks didn't make a lot of mistakes tonight. You can look to the Spencer Knight out of position. You can look to a few, penalties that the Blackhawks gave up, but the Kings are just not capitalizing. It's simple. It's just they're not capitalizing. I just don't really know what else to say there. 19 giveaways counted for the Kings tonight, but what doesn't necessarily tell you in that stat is just how lackadaisical they were with the puck, wasting chances, not necessarily always giving it up, but just wasting opportunities that led to Chicago having, even more. I thought Kempe did a good job early. He was hit pretty hard. It's to be expected that he'll do well because he's Adrian Kempe, but he got pretty hard at the end of the game, and Jim Hiller was not pleased with the no call there. But yeah, I just think the Kings need to set each other up more. It's a team that feels disjointed. The power play is lifeless. They need to change things up. I don't know if they will. Everyone is calling for that, but Jim Hiller is employing a system that he believes will work. And the Kings, to their credit, they have won some games this year. They have forced overtime and gotten points when maybe they shouldn't have. But at the same time, the amount of high danger chances they're giving up when they're a team that emphasizes defense is just, not good, simply. I talked about the lines a little bit at the beginning of this episode, but, I look at certain lines to start the game at least, and defensively too. But, Jim Hiller talked about putting Clark and Doughty together because they wanted to have Edmondson and Anderson together. And okay, I guess that makes sense. He's kind of alluding to the fact that the personnel has to be the way it is because of, lacking areas. But looking at the forwards, in now 24 games, and I know he hasn't necessarily worked with Kopitar and Kempe, but you have to pivot. When a guy is struggling, you can look at, Deneau as well. It's a little harder because he's a center, but the lines just don't feel like they're complementing each other. It feels like there's guys on the lines that are individually good. You can look at Armia on the second line, but again, he's not necessarily a second line player. So yeah, Corey Perry had a grade A chance in the beginning of the game as well. But, it's not capitalizing and not having the personnel that they have set, other guys up. It's not working. And so, yeah, it's really tough if you're the Kings. You're in a really tough spot. Even though you are in a playoff spot, you're in playoff contention in a weak Pacific Division. But it's a really interesting spot for, a team that has had this system for so long, and it's not working. So, yeah, I mean, the 2-1 loss to Washington kind of set off this recent skid after the Kings won 4 in a row on the road. And, it's just where it is right now. They've won 2 of their last 8 games. Granted, there's some overtime and shootout losses in there, so they've been able to garner points. But, the schedule coming up, they'll have to take care of business against Chicago again at home. And then, they'll play some teams that are beatable, Utah, Seattle, not road trips that are necessarily that far, but it's not going to be easy for a Kings team that just has personnel problems. That's the way I'm going to define this season. They don't have injuries right now. They've gotten healthy, but the personnel is just not there right now to generate offense. And so, yeah, I mean, Jim Hiller has to do a better job, and it all kind of runs on the front office that, didn't necessarily bring in talent to supplement what the Kings needed to do. But at the end of the day, you have to work with what you have if you're the coach, and you have to make changes when things aren't working. And he's made some changes, but they don't always make logical sense. So that's going to do it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Skate of Thrones. I'll see you guys in the next one as the Kings fall to the Chicago Blackhawks 2-1, and we'll play them again on Saturday at Crypto.com Arena. I'm Casey Kaslander, and I'll be signing off. Have a good night.